My name is Gonzalo Carrasco, and I'm a postdoc in Boyle's lab. I work with a couple of metals of biogeochemical importance. Some of them are toxic, some of them are needed, and yeah, we'll start talking about this. I was born in Peru, and in South America, and I studied a bachelor's in pharmacy and biochemistry. And when I finished, it's kind of a story. It's kind of a side story. I was really interested in environmental chemistry, but there was in South Peru and North Chile, there's lots of chemistry related to mines, so it's all industrial chemistry rather. And I was like, no, I want to study the environment. I don't want to be, doing the industry part of the story. So I got into the bio part of the chemistry story by studying pharmacy and biochemistry. So I got my bachelor's in that, but I did my thesis project you're supposed to have you're supposed to do a little research project, which in pharmacy everything was about drugs this and drugs that. I was like, I want to study this chemical in the water on this river that waters my hometown, and the potential biochemical effects of this metal accumulating in water, sediments, plants, and potentially animals. So basically covering the whole ecosystem. And that's basically what I've been doing since 1993. I applied to schools, and I was looking at environmental chemistry, ocean sciences, oceanography, very many iterations of the same field with with different labels. And I ended up being in going to Old Dominion University, where I studied a master's first and then a PhD with Joan Donat, a professor who studies basically the trace metals, not only from the total concentration perspective, but from the chemical species, which are in ecosystems very important, because the species that are bioavailable are going to be bioavailable. Hello. So they are going to be the one that cause the bio effect, as opposed to just accumulating total dissolved concentrations of some metals. So most of the studies that I've done were on zinc and cadmium, elements that are supposed to be needed. Zinc is needed for plants. Cadmium was thought to be toxic, and then it was discovered recently to be needed in the absence of zinc. So this along with cobalt are three elements that are very important for the biogeochemical function of the whole ecosystem, starting with phytoplankton and then going up the trophic level. Here in the Boyle's lab, they do more toxic. Most of the, it's not most, but some of the work that is done here is based on lead, which is a toxic element. These guys here we won't work on total concentration, but rather on, we don't work on speciation, but we work on total concentration and isotopic fractionation. Basically trying to find out where the elements come from, as opposed to necessarily the bioavailability of it. Now, there's a couple of persons that work on that, on the bioavailability of a couple of elements. And I'm thinking about basically combining both things. There are people that have worked here working on, specifically on zinc, isotopic fractionation and zinc concentration, using different methods that we used down in Old Dominion University, and that on top of a little work on speciation is what I basically intend to do in this next few years that I'll be here. When I finished my PhD, I was applying to positions basically that would require a person that needed that had the skills that I had, basically working with zinc, with this zinc or cadmium or metals in general terms, with these electroanalytical techniques. That's what I learned in Old Dominion University. Here they don't use mostly electroanalytical. They have an electroanalytical instrument that they basically work for a few basic things, and then that could be used for some of these analyses that I want to do. But most of the work in Boyle's lab is ICP-MS based, whether it's a simple concentration determination or an isotopic fractionation in another more elegant instrument that is in the green building. Right here behind this wall, there's one instrument which is sort of a basic level instrument that determines concentrations of elements. So we use it rather for that. But the other one in the green building basically is used to get more fine determinations, isotopic fractionation. And so when I finished my PhD, I was applying to positions that would involve work with what I've done. And Ed required a person to do a couple of analyses on board for the geotraces cruise in the North Atlantic that needed expertise on these electroanalytical techniques. And well, here I am. Now, after being here for a few months, I realized that there could be potential of not only learning all the things that the Boyles do, but also maybe trying to do some of the tricks I've learned when I was a grad student. So I'm combining both would give us a more coherent story. Not only about the origin or the process, where the elements come from, which is basically what the isotopic fractionation information gives us, but also trying to figure out the potential bioavailability realms of these. I just started working on a project in Kuwait. That's where I was this last couple of weeks, where not only are we going to be looking at like the water, dissolved water part of the story, but we're also looking at the potential inputs from dust. Kuwait is just on the Persian Gulf, Arabic Gulf, if you want to be politically correct there. And there's massive events of dust that provide us like make this area an interesting place to study, because we believe, the whole chemical oceanography community believes that dust storms coming either from the Gobi Desert or the Sahara Desert actually mean a lot of influence in terms specifically for iron mostly, and then for other elements possibly, in areas of the world that are depleted of any metals and therefore are sort of like no life, even though there's lots of nutrients. Those are the high nutrient, low chlorophyll areas. And so the late John Martin actually proposed the idea of the iron hypothesis, where iron coming from any potential source. In this case, we believe it could be dust storms from any desert, could like fertilize the areas where the high concentrations of nutrients are present, and therefore, boom, increase productivity of phytoplankton, and then maybe work as a sack for CO2, and maybe have to do with global warming, or solving global warming rather. So Kuwait is an interesting experiment in itself, because it's a little area surrounded by a little gap of water, where there are huge, massive sandstorms that provide all sorts of elements that are are on the mineral or in the mineral phase, and they just go, and some of it will dissolve into the water, some of it will not, some of it will just settle down. And so it's an interesting experiment in itself, because we're going to be looking at the concentrations of metals coming from the dust, lead, which is an anthropogenic metal that comes from gasoline, and in most terms, and it could be also power plants that burn coal, and then we're going to be studying this in waters, in sediments, and in coral cores. So to get an idea of a brief chronology of, say, the past, 50, 80, maybe 100 years, if we get lucky, and we can actually look at how things changed in that sort of pristine place 50 years ago, which is turned into this massive construction site where there's mega cities and constructions and Mac cars and Mac mansions all over the place. So it's a very interesting experiment in itself, because we're actually looking at a place where civilization, as we know, it sort of exploded in the past 50 years, and we can see in the historical record, hopefully in the sediments and also in the coral cores, what the concentrations and isotopic fractionations of these elements were in the pretty recent past, and how they have changed with these, brutal changes in economics because of the oil they found.